Hi, welcome to the Worship Guitar Series on electric guitar. I'm Paul Balash, and this is my friend Glenn Pierce, and who happens to be like one of my favorite guitar players in the world, and has played on the Vineyard tapes and Maranatha tapes and Integrity Music. So I feel like he's more than qualified to talk about some electric guitar concepts in the context of worship. And that's what this tape is designed for, primarily for electric guitar players that perhaps you grew up, learning all these Clapton licks and you were in club bands, or who knows what your background is, but now you find yourself in a church worship situation and you're not sure what's okay or what's not okay. Or perhaps you're a worship leader and you have an electric guitarist in your group and you're wondering what to do with this guy or this gal, and you're looking for some ways, some direction to give to them and how to better utilize this. Because I feel like electric guitar is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. It's such a key part of our culture, the music of our generation, that regardless of who has a problem with it, I really truly believe that it will be with us for a long, long time. And I'm glad about that. So this video is going to be pretty fast-paced. It's going to be relaxed. We're just going to try to move quickly so we can get a lot in. And so I hope you have your guitar handy and a pick. And we're going to cover things like effects, how to get the kind of tones that you hear on these records, and how to get those kinds of sounds, and how to use the guitar in a dynamic way. We're going to talk about how to create a palette of colors and how to make choices on different songs, how to decide whether or not to use chords or a clean sound or a dirty sound or a crunch sound, or we'll even define what those terms are if you're not familiar with those. We'll get into learning some songs. We'll also get into some soloing. So that's kind of an overview of what we're going to do. We're going to move quickly so that you can always rewind or fast forward to the part that you need to practice on the most, depending on where you're at level-wise. So let's start by tuning up.
The tuner is the most important piece of gear that any guitar player could own, because the nature of this instrument is that it will go out of tune, unlike the piano or a synthesizer or something. So you got to have a tuner, a chromatic tuner, so you don't have to necessarily switch around. The chromatic tuner helps you tune each string individually without having to change anything on the tuner. I think it's important to tune with a volume pedal so that there's no distraction in the middle of worship. I'll tune whenever I can during a set, during a song, any kind of break that I get. And I use a volume pedal that has a tuner out that goes to the tuner. When I pull back the volume pedal, it allows me to tune silently. For the purposes of the video, I'll tune the guitar right now. The first is the low E string. Low E harmonic at the 12th fret. A string. Harmonic at the 12th fret. D string. G string. B string. High E string.
Okay, here we go. Tape's rolling. 1, 2, 3. Okay, in this first section, I want to talk about equipment and effects, and the type of equipment. And there's basically 3 ingredients to a great guitar sound, and that is having a good guitar, a good amp, and some quality effects. So let's talk first about a good guitar. I find sometimes guys will have a cheap guitar and then they'll go out and buy lots and lots of effects, hoping that it'll make a cheap guitar sound good. And in my experience, it's better to do the opposite. Start off, spend your money on the best possible guitar you can afford. And that hurts financially maybe. Maybe you don't have the money, but if you feel like this is something that you have a passion about, God's called you to play guitar, lead guitar, electric guitar, whatever, in your worship band at church, or you feel like this is a long-term thing for you, then, you know, save a little extra, make it hurt a little bit, get the best quality instrument you can get, and you won't be sorry. And then later on, acquire some effects. So in terms of guitars, there's two basic types. The first type is what Glenn's playing, and that would be a Strat type guitar, coming from the original Fender Stratocaster. But now there's a lot of different variations of that. But what makes it a Strat type guitar is that it has 3 single coil pickups. And with those 3 single coil pickups, there's a lot of tone variations that you can get. So that's a little bit more versatile. The other type of guitar is more the Les Paul type guitar, whether it's a Paul Reed Smith or there's several of these type of guitars. Basically, they're a heavier guitar, and they have 2 humbucker pickups. These are called humbucker pickups. Instead of being single coil, they're double coil, and it's a much fatter sound, a much richer, perhaps, just fatter, nastier, would you say? Mm-hmm. Can we use that word in this video? Nasty. And, you know, kind of like the old Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, those kind of guys kind of leaned more towards this type of a tone. But once you've kind of decided on what kind of guitar you want, the next step is your amp. And again, there's basically 2 types of amps. There's tube amps or solid state. And I think, without a doubt, most guitar players prefer the tube because the tubes just have this warmth about it. It's not so brittle. Solid state can get real brittle sounding, and it's just not pleasing to the ear, whereas tubes tend to warm things up, smooth the tones out. It's much more pleasant to the ear. So once you've got your guitar and your amp, and again, don't worry about having to buy this big, huge, gigantic amp. You know, you can even get a small, decent little tube amp. There's a lot of companies that make decent tube amps for under $500 even. And once you've got that, then the next step would be to start acquiring some effects. And I'd really like Glenn to talk about that because I know that, you know, you could have one of those refrigerator racks with all those racks in it. But Glenn, we just did a session this past week, Praise Band 10. And to me, just the tones you were getting were just killer. Just the best tones, rich tones, you know, high soaring lead tones, clean, shimmery rhythm tones. It's all there. And yet he brought his whole effects rack in a little duffel bag, you know, that he got off the plane with. So I'd like to know, you know, what the secret is, you know, to get some of the tones that you have. You know, can you talk about some of the effects and why you have them?
Part of it is the guitar thing, like you mentioned earlier. Find a guitar that feels good in your hands. You know, go to the store and just hold a guitar. Every neck will have a slightly different shape, and everybody's hands are a little different. You know, hold a guitar, see how it feels, because that's your initial connection to the instrument. Once you've got that together, all this gear just helps you create a sound that's in your head. And nothing against rack systems. I still use a giant, you know, 24-space rack system, and I like that sound, but I find it mostly useful in the studio where you've got a perfect listening environment with stereo speakers. You can hear the stereo delays, you can hear the chorus, you can hear all these little nuances in the stereo field. But in the real world, most situations will have a mono PA system, you know, and so I find that the pedals with a single amp is a great tone. And when you listen to guys like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan, most of their tones were made with pedals and mono amps, and I think that those are some of the greatest tones in history. So I really enjoy using these boxes into a tube amp, and I find it to be just as fun as using scads of other stuff. So I start with 3 general tones: a clean tone, a crunch tone, and a lead tone. And the clean tone is essentially the sound of the guitar straight into the amp. And the great thing about Strat is you've got 5 completely different sounds to help you create a tone out of that one sound. crunch tone is basically a clean sound with a little bit more dirt or distortion on it. This is a sound I use for just about everything because, again, with the guitar you can manipulate the sound into any tone. And if you use your volume pedal, you can clean up the sound a little bit. The lead tone is that sound with a little bit more distortion.
Cool. Now that we've heard the different possibilities, tonal possibilities, it's important to kind of lay them out on our palette, like an artist would have sort of a palette and have all their colors handy, or a cook would have all the spices in front of them as they get ready to cook. I think it's important, especially when you're just starting out, to have one or two good clean tones, one or two good crunch tones, and one or two good lead tones. And just kind of pull from those colors for a while and get used to those sounds. The thing about an electric guitar is a lot of times it can create the difference between a verse and a chorus. A lot of times the verse of a song will be real sort of mellow, kind of gentle, and you'd use a clean sound, maybe with some chorusing. And then in comes the chorus, and you want to add some more energy or dynamics, and that's where, you know, the crunch tone would come in. And then coming out of that chorus, if there's some kind of a solo, then there's your lead tone. So why don't we just kind of listen to a few, maybe a dry, clean tone, and then an affected clean tone, and then a dry crunch tone. Let's kind of listen to a few of those things.
One of the things I like about the Strat is it gives me 5 completely different tone selections to work from. And with any one of these sounds, I've got 5 options tonally to go with it. So on the clean sound, I can start with any one of those sounds. So if I start with a clean sound, maybe I'll add a little delay to make it smoother. And then for like the chorus section, like Paul's talking about, I'll go to a crunch sound. But what's great about this sound is that it can also be used for a lead sound. If I add delay to it, within the same pedal, and I'll go back to maybe the bridge pickup for back to the chorus. You know? And then if I want to solo with that, then I'll just kick on the extra distortion. It'll just give me a little boost.
Cool. Why don't we do I'll just do a little bit of Open the Eyes of My Heart, and okay. We'll start off with a clean, and then a crunch, and then a lead tone. And you can hear the difference in how it creates dynamics and energy in the song. So we're stay on the E for a minute. Just start off, listen to the nice clean tone that he has. Nice clean tone. This is over the verse. Heading into the chorus, it's going to get bigger. See you high and middle. He's got his crunch tone, shine. figure with lead tone. Quiet section. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Back to his clean now. I want to see. Holy eyes in my heart, Lord. Holy eyes in my heart. I want to see. I want to see you. Lord, I want to see you. Oh, Lord. The neat thing about what Glenn is doing is, we're about to get into that, is when he plays his parts, to me, he's not just taking over. I think it's important, as whether you're an electric guitar player or a piano player or a singer, it's important to realize that we're servants with our instruments. We're servants with our gifts. And it's so easy to just say that, but let that sink down in your heart and just constantly check your own heart and say, man, I want to serve with this. I want to serve what's happening at that particular moment in the service or that particular moment in the song. And there's no room for like some ego trip or like, wow, check out this cool Van Halen lick I just learned yesterday, you know? It's all right to learn all those cool licks, and they're in your toolbox, but it's knowing when to pull those things out. And that's the difference to me between a guy like Glenn and guys that are just, you know, their heart is still sort of to like, dig me, man. You know, they're still into that rock star thing. So it's all about being a servant, not a celebrity. And you know, just ask the Lord to cultivate that in you and in your team. Talk about that, preferring one another and serving one another and being sensitive to what's going on. I also like the fact that Glenn doesn't just, you know, play 16 bars of a solo and do every lick he's ever learned, but he thinks about parts and things that will fit into the song and support the song. So that's good. Also, the concept of less is more, which we're going to get into, and I'm just cheating on my notes here. I think that's good. Let's just start talking about finding the right parts that support the song. So I think the most important thing a guitar player needs to do, and a singer, and a parent, is to learn to listen. You know, learning to listen deeply, you know, not just like hear like the intro of the song, go, oh, okay, cool, man, I got it. But like listen to the vibe, listen to the mood of the song, listen to the lyrics if they're available. Check out what the song is saying. You know, it drives me crazy when, you know, I'm all for like taking old hymns and making them more contemporary, but like when you get somebody doing like a, you know, holy, 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 you know, that's weird. Don't you hate that?
I fully hate that.
I hate when that happens. So, you know what I mean? We want to be sensitive. Read the lyrics and go, wow, this is a reverent song. So think reverently with your guitar and effects and come up with things that will create this something that supports the song. So again, I feel like Glenn does that well, whether it's a dark minor chord kind of thing or a real happy kind of up grooving kind of thing. It's knowing what to pull out of your toolbox. You know, you've got all these sounds and ideas in your toolbox, and the idea is to know what thing to pull out at the right time. And so I was just going to ask you, Glenn, sort of what goes through your mind, what process do you go through when you hear a song like this week? We did 10 new songs on an album. You know, what is the process you go through mentally to find the right sounds?
Well, it's definitely been trial and error for me because I didn't hear worship music until I was in my 20s. We went to a church that had robes and a pipe organ. And so I didn't think a band even worked in church until I heard worship music like what we were recording this week. So throughout the process, I had to kind of relearn my thinking, because worship isn't so much about yourself and your chops and how cool you are and how great you sound and all that stuff. It's about leading people into a more intimate relationship with God, and your purpose being there is to help them do that, and yourself to worship God with your instrument and your gift. So I guess what I started to do was I just kind of listened to the songs, because the songs kind of are a little different than what's going on the radio and stuff like that. And with a band or even a worship leader thing, I'll listen to the song before I'll even attempt to play something. I'll just go, man, what's this song about? What's it saying? What are the lyrics saying? Where's the melody going? Should guitar even be in this song? Sometimes I won't even play, you know, I'll just